Welcome to the Adams County Historical Society. My name is Antigone Ladd, and I am particularly pleased to host this program, which I think will introduce many of you to a portion of the battlefield you may not have visited before. Our speaker is Mark Dunkelman. Mark is an artist by training. He is a Civil War historian and author by passion. Here's a list of Mark's Civil War subjects. The one we're discussing today is the first one at the top, the Brickyard Fight and the Mural. He has written the regimental history of the 154th New York Infantry Volunteers. He also has the life, death, and celebrity of Amos Humiston, whom many of you know. He's written 12 Tales of Civil War Soldiers, Sherman's March Through Georgia, and the Irish-American General Patrick Henry Jones. Now here is a tour that Mark gave this summer, 2023, in Gettysburg, and you see him at the site of the mural and the monument to the 154th. In the audience that day were not only licensed battlefield guides, licensed town guides, but descendants of the 154th. Mark brought with him for this tour group the original sketch that he had made when he proposed to the Goldsmith Roofing Company that he paint a mural on their wall, and you see the warehouse wall right behind you. The Goldsmith people approved, and Mark went on to develop this scaled drawing in color of the mural. Holding up the end on the right is Sue Boardman, one of our Adams County Historical Society board members, and a licensed battlefield guide.
It took us 5 weeks to paint the original mural, which still boggles my mind that we did it so fast. I call Johan Bjurman the fastest brush east of the Pecos.
So with these photos from the recent tour piquing your interest in what the finished mural looks like today, I'd like to back the story up to the beginning and ask Mark to tell us about his personal interest, how he became fascinated by the Civil War, the 154th New York, and then where the idea for a mural dedicated to them came about. I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
My interest in Coster Avenue and the Brickyard Fight stems from my interest in the 154th New York Volunteer Infantry, whose monument is at the center of Coster Avenue. My great-grandfather served in the regiment. He did not fight at Gettysburg. He joined the regiment in September of 1864 and made the marches with General Sherman through Georgia and the Carolinas. I heard family stories as a child which were relayed to me by my father and my aunt, who grew up with their Civil War ancestor on a farm in Ellicottville, New York. And they, in turn, passed these stories and relics of their grandfather's service to me, and it gripped me as a child. So, at the age of 10, I received as a birthday or Christmas gift the reprinted memoirs of General William Tecumseh Sherman, because I was off and running. And to make a 50-year-plus long story short, in the years since, I've had the good fortune to connect with more than 1,300 members, descendants of members of the regiment, who have in turn provided me with 1,700 wartime letters written by members of the 154th New York, 25 diaries, and a mass of other material. It's one of the largest collections, if not the largest collection, on any single Civil War regiment, primary source materials, and certainly has been the most well documented, because I've published 6 full-length books on various aspects of the regiment's history and dozens of articles. So I've got this rather obsessive interest in the 154th New York. And oddly enough, Antigone, I don't know how this happened, but I can't remember the first time I went to Gettysburg. But I do know that it became a very important place to me when I decided to write a history of the 154th, which I was able to do with a co-author, Michael J. Winey. Mike Winey was a curator of special collections at the U.S. Army Military History Institute at Carlisle Barracks, PA. And we collaborated, and our book was published in 1988. Now, we had to write author's blurbs. And in my author's blurb, I wrote that I was planning a mural in Gettysburg adjacent to the regiment's monument there. And so my suggestion to any person that comes up with a grandiose idea is do not put it in writing, because then you will feel compelled to go through with it. And I did. I went through with it, and we're going to talk about the mural and that resulted. The fight, and I coined the term the Brickyard Fight. It pitted Charles R. Coster, Colonel Charles R. Coster's Union Brigade of 3 regiments. One had been left behind at the railroad station, the 73rd Pennsylvania. 3 regiments, 154th New York, 134th New York, and 27th Pennsylvania, against 2 brigades of Confederates, a Louisiana brigade of 5 regiments led by Brigadier General Harry Hayes, and Colonel Isaac Avery's 3 North Carolinian regiments. And this action occurred at the end of the first day's fighting at Gettysburg. And if you're familiar with the first day's battle, you know that the Union line extended. The 11th Corps was north of the town, basically, and the 1st Corps was to the west of the town. And as they were being driven back into the town by overwhelming numbers of Confederates in the late afternoon of July 1st, Coster's brigade was sent from the rallying point on Cemetery Hill down through the town to cover the retreat of the 11th Army Corps. And they marched down Baltimore Street, made a right at the Diamond, as the center of town was called then, out York Street, a left onto Stratton Street, North Stratton Street, and out to a brickyard, John Coon's Brickyard. And at the time, this was the northeastern outskirts of Gettysburg. And the brickyard was fenced. It was a pentagonal lot, and Coster's 3 regiments made their way through a carriage gateway into this brickyard, where they took shelter, scanty shelter, behind a post and rail fence. And almost immediately, these 2 Confederate brigades attacked them, and the Confederates outnumbered them more than 3 to 1 and outflanked them on both ends of the Union line. So consequently, this was a forlorn stand. They stood for about 20 minutes, and the battle resulted in almost 800 casualties, the Brickyard Fight, Union and Confederate, most of them among the Union regiments. The 134th New York, which held the right flank, was badly shot up. The 154th New York was mostly captured when they tried to make their way back the way they had come to the carriage gateway on Stratton Street. They found it was already held by the Confederates, who, as more than one member of the regiment put it, gobbled them up. So a lot of captives who, unfortunately, a good third of them would have eventually died as prisoners of war, either at Belle Island on the James River opposite Richmond, or in Andersonville in Georgia. So that's sort of the thumbnail of the fight at Coon's Brickyard. And then when the Gettysburg Battlefield Association was purchasing land, 3/4 of an acre was purchased and named Coster Avenue in honor of the commander of the Union troops in the fight. It's 3/4 of an acre, and it's the smallest portion of the Gettysburg National Military Park, but it is part of the Gettysburg National Military Park. And because of its location, tucked away off of a side street in the borough, which has swallowed it up at this point with residential properties and light industry, Coster Avenue is frequently overlooked. Let's start with the company. It's the Roy Goldsmith Roofing Company, which is today Goldsmith Roofing and Sheet Metal. And Roy Sr., Roy Jr., and now Roy Jr.'s son Mike have been very helpful to me with this project. They gave me permission to put the painting up on their wall. As I'll talk about when we discuss the book, I happened to be visiting here in April of 1970 and saw this wall being built. And I had never paid attention to the roofing company, quite frankly, before then. But now here was this wall that was going to go up, and it was going to be literally 10 feet behind the monument to the 154th New York. And it was going to, in my opinion, form a very unsightly backdrop to the monument. But after a period of time, I realized I could make the wall disappear and bring back the scene that occurred on that very site on the first day of the battle. And it happens that I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration from Rhode Island School of Design. So I'm trained as an artist, and I started making my sketches, and after a lengthy period, finally came up with one that satisfied myself and my critics, and that was the beginning. That's how it started.
Well, that's fascinating, because your mural is on the wall of the commercial building. Mm-hmm. Is it physically on the battlefield itself? No. Yes?
It's not on national park property, but it's certainly on the battlefield. Because the Custer-Hayes-Avery fight takes up not only that little strip of Custer Avenue, but all the surrounding neighborhood. Particularly as you go south, because the Confederates were coming from the north. They drove the Yankees from the Brickyard down through the streets, Stratton Street. They scattered through house lots, over fences. As one member of the 154th New York put it, the ones that got away were the best runners. So there you go.
Now let's turn to the book itself, Mark, and tell us about Gettysburg's Custer Avenue, the Brickyard Fight, and the mural.
Take a look at where we are. Where is Custer Avenue, the Brickyard? Well, the Brickyard was here in 1863, and the map on the left shows the action that occurred at John Coon's Brickyard on the afternoon of the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, when 3 United States regiments faced against 2 Confederate brigades, as outlined here on the map. And on the upper right, we have a map of Custer, the area around Custer Avenue today. And as you can see, a formerly wide-open area of northeast Gettysburg has been hemmed in by a residential and light industry neighborhood. Custer Avenue is the smallest portion of the Gettysburg National Military Park, well away from the rest of the park, 3/4 of an acre, hidden in town off of North Stratton Street, in the northeastern quadrant of Gettysburg. Early photographs of Gettysburg, of Custer Avenue and specifically, are generally because of the monuments there, primarily the monument to the 154th New York Volunteer Infantry, pictured here. It was dedicated in 1890. So this photograph shows the view, and again, look at how open the land is. You can see the borough of Gettysburg in the background. That tall spire on the left is St. James Lutheran Church on the corner of North Stratton and York Street. Here's a very rare photograph. I've only seen one print of this, mutilated as you can see, with a mistaken identity of the 145th, which is incorrect. It is the monument to the 154th New York. This view is looking east. And you can see fencing here, which outlines Custer Avenue. You can see the right flank marker of the 154th New York there. But look at the open fields, how open it is. Wide open spaces in Gettysburg at this point, in the area around Custer Avenue. Here's a group of veterans at the monument. I don't believe this is the dedication photo because it was taken by Levi Mumper, this particular photograph. And we know that William H. Tipton took photos at the dedication because of his catalog. They're listed in his catalog. I've yet to find a Tipton photograph of the veterans of the 154th New York at their monument. Here's another photo taken on the same occasion by Mumper of the group of veterans with their entire party. And I believe that this post and rail fence you can see on the left here was probably the original fence at which the regiment took shelter on the first day of the battle. Look at how close it is to the monument. Had to be the original fence. Another group of veterans. Unfortunately, in this case, these veterans are identified, but the date is unidentified. And that's a shame. And here we are looking, again, looking south towards York Street. Those are houses in the skyline there on York Street. Again, showing how wide open this area was at the time of the battle. And for years after. This is 30 years later. This photograph appeared in a schoolboy's essay about Coster Avenue. He lived in the neighborhood and was a student with the late Colonel J. Met Sheed's history class at Gettysburg High School. And this dates from 1963. So you can see the white marble monument to the 27th Pennsylvania on the right, marker to Coster's Brigade and the 154th Monument at the center, an old tree that stood on Coster Avenue for a long time. And this is a very rare shot of how it looked during the Civil War centennial, 100 years after the action that occurred here. And you can see that there is encroachment by modernity over to the right of the photo in these buildings. Here's a photo a RISD, Rhode Island School of Design classmate of mine, Ed Grozda, photographer, took on a visit in 1969. And you can see the buildings in the background. They're literally only within feet of Coster Avenue and the 154th Monument. Let's jump forward in time. This is a series of Polaroids I took on a visit in April of 1970. Again, we're looking east, houses hemming in Coster Avenue. This is looking directly north from behind the 154th Monument. Houses again, Victor Street and Pine Streets, a residential neighborhood that was created after World War II. And this is a very important photograph. This is actually a photograph of my wife taking the previous photograph. You can see her in the distance behind the stacks of concrete blocks there. And a concrete block wall is being built to extend the Roy Goldsmith Company roofing warehouse. And we just happened to be there, April of 1970, to see this wall under construction. And this wall was literally going to be 5 feet, 10 feet away from the 154th New York's monument. Here's a picture of me walking Coster Avenue. The old tree is still there, so this is a fairly early photo. And look at the grass. It's almost, shin high. The NPS didn't take great care of Coster Avenue because it was one of the, if not the least visited portions of the Gettysburg National Military Park. Here's another picture looking at the wall. Here, the wall's cleaned up. At this point, I'm looking at this wall and I'm thinking, I can make this wall disappear, as it literally has in this photo. Look at how the foliage has just entirely concealed it. I can make this wall disappear, and I can make the scene that occurred on this very site reappear by means of a mural. So this is sometime in the mid-70s that this idea came to me. And here I have a drawing dated 1977 of the monuments, the warehouse wall. I got the idea now. I'm starting to make sketches. I want to make a mural on this wall, which I said is approximately 75 feet long. I was 5 feet off. It was 80 feet long. So I started making sketches. And one of the artistic challenges was to develop a point of view where I didn't have to depict the town of Gettysburg in the background, because I thought that would be very difficult to recreate. So this early sketch, which is sort of a bird's eye view, I quickly eliminated this because I would have had to show the entire town in the background. No thank you. And not to mention, this is not quite rectangular enough for the space that I needed to fill. So here is another sketch that I did, a pencil sketch, that was pretty close to, as I captioned it here, adopted point of view, ground level, looking south-southwest. I figured that was sort of the best angle to portray this scene. And here's another one of my early pencil sketches, which of course was rejected. There aren't enough soldiers here, and they're rather kind of statically posed. But I'm working also on the background, the landscape, the buildings, etc. I portrayed 2 houses in the mural, both of which stood there at the time of the battle. And here we are, finally, my completed 1-inch equals 1 foot scale pencil sketch, the final sketch for the mural. And I must add that I was showing these sketches to several friends in Gettysburg, the late Colonel J. Met Sheeds, who I mentioned earlier, Kathy George Harrison, who was a historian at the Gettysburg National Military Park, and William A. Frazanito, the well-known Civil War photographic expert genius. And they had very helpful comments, and also my late partner, Michael J. Wani, who was with the U.S. Army Military History Institute at the time, Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. And they critiqued my drawings, and when they saw this one, they said, well, this looks good as far as we can tell. Nobody really knows exactly what it looked like, but based on historical evidence, this might be a pretty good reproduction of the scene that occurred on the afternoon of July 1st, 1863. And I based this scene on one of the Confederates in his official report stated that the Yankees held their position until we jumped the fence into their midst. And that seemed to me to be the climactic moment of the Custer-Hayes-Avery fight and the scene that I chose to portray. Now, I had always worked small. I had never worked this scale. And luckily for me, a mutual friend and fellow artist introduced me to this fellow, Johan Bjurman, at the time a resident of North Providence, Rhode Island. And Johan had done a lot of mural work, painted billboards, and he agreed to collaborate with me on this project. And it turned out to be an absolutely great partnership. We got along really well. More importantly, Johan even convinced me to paint this thing like a big billboard. Had we come down to Gettysburg, we would have been looking at lodging, feeding ourselves, and painting a mural on a concrete block wall with all of its pits and grooves and texture, and painting when the weather permitted painting. Johan convinced me, we can paint this in Rhode Island and put it on a truck and take it down there. Paint it like a billboard. It's painted oil paint on what's called multi-density overlay board, which has literally a paper finish to it, but smooth white finish. And oil paint. What we did was we made transparencies of my pencil sketch and then projected them on the section, 24-foot wide sections. And we did an underpainting of 3-color underpainting, and then we did the final painting. It took us 5 weeks to paint that entire mural, which still boggles my mind. A lot of it was done with 1-inch brushes because of the amount of detail in the mural. So I couldn't have done it without Johan Bjurman. It's his painting as much as mine. He's a really great artist. He's now retired down to Florida. We stay in touch all the time. He just loved this project. And Johan now realizes that he's part of Gettysburg history because of our mural. And here is the mural in progress in the studio, Johan's studio in Providence. He only had room for 5 panels to be hung at once. And so we would hang up the 5 panels, do our projecting, our underpainting, our final painting. We'd paint 4.5 panels, slide the half-finished panel down to the other end of the, put up 4 more, repeat the process, and like I said, 5 weeks, and we had a finished mural. I won't go into the trip to Gettysburg, the hell trip, the absolute hell trip, but we did get to Gettysburg. You'll have to read the book. You got to read the book to hear about this. We got to Gettysburg, and the mural went up. And as you can see, here's sections being put up one at a time on some iron work. And here's Johan and I standing in front of the finished thing. This was in 1988. We were up here in the springtime. But the mural was up for the anniversary, which that was the 125th anniversary of the battle. Here's a photo of it, full length, by the late Walter Lane, who was sort of the dean of Gettysburg photographers for many years. He took a lot of photos that appeared in books. He was a very well-known local photographer. And he got a great shot. The mural is 80 feet long. It tapered from about 12.5 feet on the left because of the configuration of the ground to about 10.5 feet on the right. So it's a big picture. Second largest painting in Gettysburg after the cyclorama. Well, here the mural's looking a little different, isn't it? This is probably taken in the late 90s, I would guess. And as you can see, Mother Nature has had some effect on the marine spar varnish and the paint underneath. The painting is looking shabby, very shabby. Here's a detail, a close-up. You can see how it's alligatoring and it's falling apart. This is a portrait I took at breakfast in my home in Providence when Edwin C. Bars, the late great Ed Bars, came for a visit to speak to the Rhode Island Civil War Roundtable. My wife and I put him up overnight, and over breakfast, Ed told me that he never used to take people to Coster Avenue. There was no way to interpret the battle. But Mark, when your mural went up, I started taking people there all the time, because now we can interpret what happened in the Brickyard Fight. I said to him, Ed, you've seen the mural recently, then you know it's in terrible shape. I've been trying to raise money to restore it, but I'm not a good money raiser, and it's just, I got to raise money to restore it. Ed said, Mark, I might be able to help you out. A few months later, I got an invitation from a group that calls themselves the Bars Brigade. And they are devoted, dedicated followers of Ed Bars that travel with him to historic sites around the country. And I'm going to get emotional talking about Ed because he was such a great guy. Such a great guy and such a knowledgeable man. He would take people to these places and he would tell them what happened there in tremendous detail, all out of his head. No notes necessary. So I hear from a member of the Bars Brigade informing me that every year they get together and they celebrate Ed's birthday in Northern Virginia, and they have a big party, and they make a charitable donation to the Civil War preservation cause of Ed's choice. And in the year 2001, Ed chose the Coster Avenue mural to be the recipient of his followers' largesse. And so I went down to Falls Church, Virginia, to Ed Barr's annual birthday bash, June 29th. Semper Fi, the wounded World War II veteran. And it was a great party. The theme was rock and roll, so Ed put on a blonde wig and lip-synced to an Elvis song. And then, of course, mentioning Elvis made him think of Tupelo, Mississippi, after which he gave us a lengthy blow-by-blow account of the Battle of Tupelo, Mississippi, all out of his head. And at the end of the night, they handed me an envelope stuffed with checks. And so a couple days later, we rendezvoused with the Bars Brigade in Gettysburg. And here's me and Ed in front of the shabby mural. And we're ready to go. Johan and I were ready to go. We had the money now to do this refurbishment of the mural. So we got down here, and we were here right after September 11th, 2001, the last week in September and the first week in October. And here, a visitor took a picture of the two of us as we were about to start work. We had 2 weeks of absolutely beautiful weather. The original mural took us 5 weeks to paint. We did it in 2 weeks this time, but of course it's basically painted underneath here anyway. We scraped off the old varnish and got to work. And here's how it looked after 2 weeks of work. Bright, clean, sharp, clear. Looking good again. Good for another few years. And a print. Some people wanted to make a print of the mural, and so they took photographs, digital photographs of it, and a print was made of it, which turned out to be very fortuitous. Here's a picture. Ed was so busy, we wanted to have a rededication of the mural. It occurred in October. He was tied up until then, and there were a couple young reenactors there with us that posed for this photograph. I had my original sketch with me. That's what's in the mailing tube underneath my arm in this photo. Well, the same thing, of course, happened after a period of years. Mother Nature got her hooks into it again, and this shows not only how bad the mural was looking, but there's some structural damage, too, down at the bottom. At this point, Johan and I had been joking that we were going to be down here years to come with our walkers and wheelchairs painting this picture for the umpteenth time. And I didn't want to have to do that. I wanted to figure out a way to reproduce the image on a permanent surface. Here's another detail showing the fading. I had the good fortune to meet a woman and explain my dilemma, and she said, "Have you thought about painting the mural on glass?" Or reproducing the mural on glass, actually. And I said, no, I hadn't heard about that. And she told me about this process and a local glass company that had used it with a local artist. So I got in touch with the people at Lucid Glass Studio in Rhode Island, and they told me that it's an Israeli firm called Diptech that has developed this method of printing on glass using gigantic inkjet printers that use ceramic inks, after which the glass glows through two kiln-like heat treatments that fuses the imagery to the glass. And if you feel the back of the glass where the imagery is, it's just as smooth as the front of the glass. That imagery is cooked right into that glass. But to do the mural on the glass, we needed new digital files. The ones that were taken for the print several years before were inadequate. So what we did was we used those files to make about a 13-foot-long print on canvas, which Johan then painted over to create the artwork for the glass mural. And in painting over, he was able to make some adjustments, one of which was very important to me, and that is to extend the line of Confederates across the wheat field on the right-hand side of the mural, showing that they were enveloping the left flank of the Union line more clearly. And so here's Johan's finished artwork for the glass version of the mural. I also should mention that in the course of working on this, there was a mathematical miscalculation made, and consequently the glass mural is, 10 feet shorter than the original mural. It's 70 feet long, and we also made it a strict rectangle rather than try to accompany it to the configuration of the landscape, the ground. Well, Johan painted me into the mural. He didn't paint himself in there, which is too bad. And this is Johan's portrait of me. I had painted myself into the original mural. I got some photographs of that, not included in this slideshow, but, you know, Paul Philippeteau did it in the Gettysburg Cyclorama, so I figured we should do it for this mural too. Here I am with Clint Hopkins and Mark Moran of Lucid Glass Studio, uncrating one of the glass panels as they arrived in Gettysburg from Standard Bent Glass in western Pennsylvania. They're the outfit that have the Diptech machine and did the printing. Here's a picture I took. Detail. I wanted to show the 151st Monument reflected in the glass. A lot of photographers really don't like the glass mural because it's very reflective. But under certain conditions, you can get a reflection-free image of the mural. And I kind of like the reflections, A, because it shows that it's glass, and this painting's going to last forever on glass. B, because it ties the mural together with what the mural looks at, the outside world. And the mural is an image of history that is always now, because of this reflection, tied in with the present day. You see yourself in the history. I kind of like the reflections, personally. This one soldier that's depicted on this slide gets a lot of comments from visitors because he's wearing the United States belt plate upside down, which Confederates would do with captured equipment as a sign of disrespect for the United States of America. So here is a photo by my friend Sue Sipperly at Gettysburg after the glass mural went up, and look, you have to really look hard to see any reflections. So it is possible to get a reflection-free image of the mural. And here we are. So thank you for visiting Coster Avenue with me digitally.